maniando majimbara baritayao.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me is my good brother here in the temples, coming straight from Distorted Illuminations, good brother Monarch.
I am too hot and sweaty to come up with some random intro, so we're back with Mysteries of the Yokai.
So
look, man, summer gets hot.
Yeah, and we're only in the first half of the dog days. Why is it?
I haven't even made it into Houston yet.
Yeah, why is it called the dog days? Because you may as well sweat like one. But we are back with our continued look at Mysteries of the Yokai. Last time around was a relatively short episode because the introduction was shorter than I had anticipated, and we couldn't do introduction and the character part in one go. It didn't feel right to do that. So we are taking a alternative approach instead. And for this one, as you can see, there's 4 parts of character creation that we are going to be doing, and it's pretty much going to cover the bulk of character creation. There's a couple things we'll be getting into next week, but this is a good chunk of it, and it's more about how we separate it between episodes, because obviously we're not doing a whole core book of this size in 1 week.
Yeah,
I'm crazy, but I'm not that crazy. But last time around, we went into a little bit of the premise, and that this is going to be doing Fantasy Japan, but focusing a lot more on the supernatural aspect. And because of that, what era of Japanese history this is meant to take place in is not important. But
also worth noting, combat is not going to be the main focus of this game.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely going to be an aspect of it, but that intro treated as kind of like when all else fails, combat may ensue.
Mm-hmm. So the first section within character is just going into what character creation is. And I think the first place that I'd want to go into is the sidebar regarding potential. And potential is a word that you're going to hear a lot this week and next week. Just putting that out there right now. Quote, potential is the resource that players use to buy abilities for their characters. These abilities define what the player can do during play. The GM sets the amount of potential that players begin the game with, based on how powerful the characters will be in relation to the rest of the world. Usually, players begin with 100 potential, but some games may be based on more or less. Be sure to ask your GM before you build your character. So, those of you who are familiar with Shadowrun may be familiar with Karma. This is operating under a similar principle, but only on the surface level, obviously. And
I will say most of this first page, I'm glad it's here, but this is kind of just a basic guidelines to sitting down, like explaining how character creation works in a less than crunch sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cooperate with your players, clear things with GM, just things like that.
Yeah. There is also a sidebar about total potential, which covers what I already mentioned, but it also brings up that a source of bonus potential is buying Katas, which is something we will get to. We will get to Katas this week.
Yes.
All right.
So I guess then I'll kick us off with abilities.
Mm-hmm.
During play, your character will face many challenges and make important decisions. For simple actions or quick scenes, you can describe what your character is doing to the GM and other players. Oh, excuse me. When there is a chance of failure or when you are opposed by other characters, you will need to use the game rules to resolve those actions. In these cases, you use your character's abilities by following the rules provided. Abilities are purchased by spending potential. Characters may be able to gain temporary actions and other options during play, but these gains are temporary and can be lost as easily as they are gained. Anything purchased with potential is a permanent part of the character. Even if lost as part of the story, these abilities return without having to be repurchased.
Lovely, so we don't have anything like permanent skill drain.
I am going to say something that's slightly annoying. There is a sidebar, permanent abilities, which is basically word for word what was listed directly above this sidebar. I do not know why it is here. Slight nitpick, though. So, abilities are split into the following categories. Attributes are possessed by all characters. They measure the qualities that define every sentient creature, body, mind, and soul.
Mm-hmm.
Skills represent training in certain classes of actions, such as fighting or using ki. Skills are associated with a specific attribute. Bonuses from both apply when using skills. Techniques are broad categories of other abilities that cover everything from magical blessings to the potential tricks of the Grand Court.
Political
tricks. And attack and defenses are the most common actions for your character will take during conflicts, which we'll get to later.
Mm-hmm.
You build signature attacks to represent things your character does commonly. Warriors often have a signature attack representing weapons or martial arts, while a diplomat might have one that represents the ability to convince others to leave a fight willingly without needing to inflict physical harm on them. Defenses allow you to use your skills to counter the attacks of enemy characters.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got katas next. Katas are package deals of abilities that represent the benefit of repeated, focused practice in a specific profession or field of study. You spend potential to purchase a kata, and then receive the abilities listed inside the kata as if you had purchased them all separately. So you basically can buy a set of skills for cheaper, but they're all focused in one area. then worry to buy them a la carte.
Mm-hmm.
Then we've got professions. Professions are a special classification of things your character can do, similar to abilities, but are not purchased with potential. They use mastery points, details later. They are a group of abilities that are central to the way you define your character's class or archetype. They also establish what your character is allowed to do in the story's narrative without needing explicit rules from the book. More information on professions found a bit later. So then we get to purchasing abilities. Create a character for use in Mysteries of the Yokai. You will spend your potential on abilities that define what the character can do and how well they can do it. Anything purchased with potential is a permanent part of your character, and in many cases, the more potential you spend, the better or more powerful that ability will be. Most abilities use a table that provides a bonus based on the total potential you spent on the ability. These bonuses are not cumulative. Use the highest entry that you qualify for. You must have spent at least as much as a listed potential requirement to qualify for a bonus. This goes from 0 as a +1, well, if you spend 0 potential, a +1, all the way up to 70 potential, gets you a +8.
Mm-hmm. You're probably getting flashbacks to Shattered, aren't you?
A little bit.
And for more on attributes, see, attributes on page 12.
So you may end up with the potential invested in an ability that is more than enough for one modifier, but not enough for the next. This often happens if you buy katas, which provide a set amount of potential to a listed set of abilities, or when the GM awards potential to specific abilities after an adventure in which you use them. We'll get more into that on character progression in a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
In these cases, you continue to use the highest modifier that you fully reached and can spend more potential later to reach the next modifier. So you can basically just invest even if it's not going to raise your modifier.
Yep.
And we get single purchase abilities. When an ability does not have a ranked potential table, it provides a set action or modifier that your character can use during play, such as a martial arts technique or the ability to create protective circles of magic. Once you have paid the costs listed for that ability, you can use it by following the rules provided in the ability's description. These abilities may improve indirectly over time based on other abilities. A technique that is performed using an attribute will improve for free as the attribute increases. There is no need to pay additional potential for these kinds of abilities.
Mm-hmm.
We get a quick example here for Ignore Armor. But we'll probably get a bit more into specific abilities a little later.
Mm-hmm.
And some notes on potential. You can spend potential when creating your character, and later as the campaign advances. Anytime you're able to purchase new abilities, you can also increase existing ones that use a ranked potential table. And anytime you use an ability with an effect based on total potential spent, your game modifier is based on the total spent through the entire game campaign history. Reference the table for that ability and record changes as you spend more potential. Use the highest bonus you qualify for. Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, that's basically an XP buy system. You're given so many points, spend on what you want.
Yeah, and because of the fact that this is going to be crucial to character creation and advancement, that's why it's front-loaded here.
Yes.
Then we get to attributes. All characters possess 9 basic abilities known as attributes, which are divided between the 3 domains of body, mind, and soul. This will be very familiar to anybody playing Besem or playing any White Wolf game in the last 30 years. They can be used to compare the relative effectiveness of characters, as well as the most commonly applied bonus when resolving actions taken during the game. If your character does not possess any other abilities relevant to the task at hand, you can always use the corresponding attribute. All characters have attributes. Attributes represent the core abilities of a character. They indicate the ways that someone might approach and influence their world. Characters can purchase and possess many kinds of attributes, but they all have the 9 attributes by default. Attributes are divided into the domains of body, mind, and soul. Each of these domains contains 3 attributes: the prowess, the fortitude, and a finesse of that domain. Prowess attributes allow the character to act upon the world, including taking aggressive actions and reshaping the environment or situation. Fortitude attributes measure the ability to resist change and attacks against the character, as well as physical damage or social pressure. Finesse attributes measure the precision, speed, and grace with which the character performs their actions. And we have a nice little chart of the matter of prowess, fortitude, finesse on one axis, and body, mind, and soul in the next, which leads to the 9 attributes of for body, strength, endurance, and agility; for mind, intelligence, discipline, and perception; and for soul, zeal, resolve, and insight. And right after that, it goes into a bit of a paragraph for each.
That said, I'll say with this, all of those seem pretty self-explanatory for what you'd expect them to do.
Mm-hmm. So, and then we get to buying attributes, and we see that same potential spent chart that we saw beforehand. All attributes are abilities that provide a modifier based on the total potential spent. Spending more on them increases the modifier for that attribute. Then player character bonus. Basically, PCs always have at least a +1 to any attribute checks. Which, given how freeform character creation is, I'm glad that is made so you don't have a case where you don't have an attribute at all if you didn't spend any points in it, or put the pressure that you have to put some potential in all 9 attributes. And since we're dealing with D6, a +1 is going to have a bit more weight than if this was D20.
Well, D6 or D3. But yes.
Mm-hmm. See, then attribute check. As mentioned, roll 3d6, add your attribute, that's the result. And then we get to skills, and I'll hand it over to you for that.
Alright. So skills are a category of abilities that cover groups of activities that characters can perform. Every skill has an associated attribute and a skill modifier that is increased by spending potential. When a character needs to perform a skill, they make a skill check by rolling a 3d6 and adding their skill modifier, as well as the attribute modifier for the associated to generate a total. For associated attributes, when you first spend potential on a skill, choose one of the 3 listed attributes for that skill. This is the associated attribute. The attribute you choose should reflect how your character performs that skill. So the interaction skill is used for various social-related activities, convincing others to see your point of view, gathering information, etc. The choices for interaction are discipline, representing the character. Representing characters who interact through controlled emotions, insight for characters who empathize with others, or zeal for characters who are interesting by virtue of the conviction that they speak. So you should choose the attribute that makes the most sense for your character. Sometimes the player may have a concept that requires an attribute other than the 3 available. For example, an aesthetic martial artist may want to associate their fighting skill with insight to represent knowing how opponents are likely to react in battle. Players who take the unconventional technique on page 61 to allow them to choose different attributes. The cost for this technique depends on how many times a player takes non-standard attributes, but the first one is free. So every player can choose to associate a single skill with an unlisted attribute. This is so characters can be created with at least one skill that works differently, setting the character apart from other people in the world. I really like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad it doesn't go overboard with it and just say choose whichever you want. That would get ridiculous.
Yeah, and
but giving everyone that one free choice,
mm-hmm.
I like it.
Yeah, and we've seen games where an attribute skill system has the attributes already assigned to certain skills, but the problem that can happen with that is some attributes get more attention than others. And yes, I am taking aim at Pathfinder with how dexterity and intelligence seem to have all the damn skills. Well, that and dexterity is basically a god stat compared to everything else in terms of what it impacts.
For volume, yes. But then you get other skills that just what they do is generally more important. It's a weird setup.
Well, it's what happens when you introduce a skill system into a framework that it wasn't designed for.
Yeah.
But
yes, next up we've got buying skills.
Mm-hmm.
All skills are abilities that provide a modifier based on total potential spend. Spending more on them increases the modifier for that skill. A character counts as having a skill as soon as they have at least a +1 skill modifier. So it takes 2 potential to have access to skills during play. We have another nice little chart here. It's set up just like the other with potential spent and the skill modifier.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice here the number, it takes less potential to get a higher number, but it's just for the skill rather than whereas your stats are going to apply to multiple skills. So we get this little sidebar here, PC versus NPC skills. Player characters must have at least a +1 in a skill in order to make the check. Because skill checks include the associated attribute modifier, and because all characters start with at least a +1 in all attribute modifiers, all PCs have a minimum of a +2 check, while most beginning characters will have between 3 to 6. NPCs are not usually created using potential in the same way as PCs, but have preset values for their abilities. Because of this, weaker unskilled NPCs may well have no modifier.
I am glad that once again we're not doing the whole thing of PCs and NPCs are created the same way. That was a bad habit that happened in the early 2000s, and I'm glad we're out of that. Not completely. There are some story games that try and do that, but for the most part, I don't see that as much as I used to.
Yeah. I'm not against the idea, depending on how complex a system we're working with. Because I do not want to make a bunch of NPCs the same way I would make PCs in Pathfinder. That would get tedious, to say the least.
Let me tell you about Hero System. Actually, let's not.
Alright, so then we got other skills. The list of skills included in the book are meant to cover most commonly occurring situations in the world of Mysteries of the Yokai. If a player wants to take an action, the GM should decide which skill most closely fits the situation. There is a lot of overlap on skills in order to let players approach problems from different ways. So a skill used to live off the land would depend on how the character was trying to do it. Nature affinity could be used to raise animals and crops, whereas survival could be used to trap animals or survive off bad tasting but non-poisonous fruit. Similarly, many social situations could be resolved with interaction or manipulation. In cases where no skill applies, GMs should allow the player to make an attribute check. The 9 attributes cover anything that a character can do, so choose the most appropriate one based on how the character is attempting to solve the problem. So GMs may want to create new skills that are specific to the themes of their campaign. In these cases, a new skill functions just like the skills presented here. Create the skill, give it a list of things the player can do with it, and choose the 3 associated attributes. And finally, skill specialization. Each skill covers a group of similarly related things. These are designed so that a character doesn't need to pay for multiple skills in order to be confident at their job. Because of this, some players may find that a skill covers things that don't make sense for their particular character. Example, a wandering martial artist may take survival to represent the character's ability to find food, but if that particular character was famous for getting lost, it would not make sense for them to have the navigation aspect of the skill. Players may choose to specialize their skills when they are first purchased. Define a narrow aspect of the skill that the character excels in, and when making skill checks in that capacity, add a further +2 result to the check. However, when making skill checks with that skill in any other situation, receive a -1. Note that skill specialization only applies to skill checks and improvised attack. If another ability, such as a signature attack or technique, uses a skill to make checks, you make those checks without specialization.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very nice clarification right there.
Yep.
I will say I think this book so far has had some very good problem-solving text.
Mm-hmm. That being said, right after skill specialization, we have a skill list. And there's not as many skills as one would think. Like, the list of skills is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Just 12 skills. Which are athletics, evaluate, fighting, interaction, investigation, key attunement, leadership, manipulation, medicine, nature affinity, survival, and vice. Of the two of them, key attunement is what's used as a lot of supernatural interactions. A lot of the other skills are self-explanatory. Vice is the things that are not proper. It is interesting that there's not a specialization list for each skill, but what there is a collection of 3 attributes that it can be associated with. This does mean that somebody isn't which I will take 3 associated attributes over 1. This does mean that there's multiple ways to get certain spreads. But then we have katas. Katas are packaged deals that reward a character for dedicated training in a well-established field of study. When you purchase a kata, you pay the required amount of potential inside the kata to your character. Katas benefit characters who focus on specific paths of advancement. They allow you to end up with more than 100 potential, but somewhat restrict where that potential goes. If you choose not to use katas, you will have more freedom to take additional abilities, but your total overall potential will be slightly lower than someone who takes mostly katas. You can freely mix the purchase of katas with spending potential on specific attributes, skills, or other abilities. Katas may be taken multiple times. Now, some of you may think that katas are the martial arts training approach, which that is not what this is going for. I'd say katas are more akin to skill packages or even occupations. That said, each kata costs 8 potential and provides a total of 10 potential to specific attributes and skills. And there's a lot more katas than there were skills.
I would hazard a guess. I'd think the game's almost kind of expecting you to pick at least one kata.
Well, remember, you can purchase them multiple times. The idea is, like, for example, the first one is Advocate, which is going to give you 2 potential in Intelligence and Perception for attributes, and 2 in Evaluate, Fighting, and Manipulation. And that, if you were to do that individually, that would cost a total of 10. So katas are akin to skill groups in Shadowrun, in the sense that they are a package you can buy over and over. That is a little bit more cost effective, but is a little bit more precise.
Yeah.
So I'd actually say the game expects you to balance between purchasing things directly versus purchasing through katas.
Oh, definitely.
I think early on you should be spending a good amount of your potential on different katas. And I know I said profession, but but none of them have any prerequisites. But like just purchasing them once probably isn't going to do much for you. Now, the full list of kata is Advocate, Agent, Alchemist, Ascetic, Broker, Charlatan, Combat Medic, Detective, Diplomat, Doctor, Emissary, Exorcist, Explorer, Forest Sage, Herbalist, Hunter, Investigator, Mercenary, Merchant, Ninja, Noble, Outsider, Peasant, Performer, Scholar, Shaman, Soldier, Stranger, Thief, Trickster Spirit, Vagrant, Wanderer, Warder, Warrior, Watchman, and Worker. Warder is basically warding off spirits. Wanderer is, well, self-explanatory. Vagrant, I'd say, is the equivalent of... In fact, it pretty much is Ronin, because each of these has the Japanese equivalent name in their description. But I like this approach of giving out packages, because with the combination of having to spend potential on attributes and skills, even with the small amount here, it can create analysis paralysis. But next we have techniques, and I'll let you take that.
Alright, so techniques are a broad category of other abilities that a player can purchase for their character. Some techniques are abilities that provide bonuses based on the potential spent, with their own individual cost and modifier charts. Others are single purchase abilities that provide a benefit at the listed potential cost. Any character can purchase any technique. Each technique has a name and some descriptive game world information. These are provided for the players to have an easy way to find techniques in the list, and to give potential ideas on how they could be described when used by a character. However, players are free to describe techniques in any way that fits their concept, independent of the details listed below. So an armor technique could be an actual physical set of armor, the tough skin, or plating of a yokai. A key force field, or even represent a fast yokai that, even when hit by attacks, takes less damage due to partially deflecting the blow.
Mm-hmm.
But then we got immediately just a good page worth of techniques listed, and then a full description of each one.
with the lists that we've seen with both skills, katas, and techniques, they're treated as a one-page index, and the whole thing is bookmarked. Which, I don't know about you, but I appreciate that.
Yes. This is up there with some of the like nicer navigation we've seen out of any of the stuff we've covered. I've come to really appreciate books after doing this that are just easy to read and follow, and bookmarks and content. Oh, have we learned how bad that can get?
Is that more slander towards Valhalla?
I don't know if I'd even say Valhalla was the worst, or actually organizational-wise, it might still have been the worst.
No.
So yes, it is more Valhalla slander.
Like, I hate to keep picking on it because I hate to keep picking on the works of small, passionate teams. But I have to maintain my standards. The techniques remind me a lot of advantage disadvantage systems in some other freeform games, especially stuff like World of Darkness. Depending on the version of World of Darkness we're referring to. Each of the techniques that we have here has a different type of potential expenditure rate. Some of them you only spend once. Some of them you spend multiple times. Some of them have a particular cap. Some of them do not. And each of them has this little this bit of flavor text that is all about potential ways that you could theme the different techniques, which is something I appreciate, since depending on what idea somebody has in their head, they may have some issues trying to translate the moves that they want to do with the way the techniques are presented.
No, I think it'd be worth looking at least just one of these techniques. We're clearly not going to read through every one of these.
Mm-hmm.
But I picked Calculated Strike since this is a quick read to give us an idea of how these work. So we've got Calculated Strike with the potential cost. This one is 2. This technique is used with any attack action, allowing the character to take additional time in order to receive a modifier to their attack check. When you use this action, choose an attack action. Pay any cost for that action and perform any other necessary steps, but do not make the attack check. Once all remaining characters in the round have had a chance to act once, the character uses the chosen attack action. Calculated Strike adds a +3 to the check made for the delayed attack. This is the kind of thing you can expect out of the techniques. Now, obviously, it's a much bigger range than just simple attack actions and all that. But
yeah, but I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up the theming Calculated Strike right after that.
Yes. So the options in here are Trained Assassins and Ninja know exactly where to strike their target for maximum effect. A common tactic of advocates is to intentionally enrage a suspect in order to trick them into revealing their deceit in a moment of passion. This often requires pursuing a seemingly unrelated line of questioning before bringing it to the matter of guilt in the end. And many poisons and diseases take a short time to fully materialize their effects, but are extremely hard to neutralize once symptoms take hold. That gives you a big variety of things that you can apply something like Calculated Strike for.
It also makes clear that Calculated Strike is not just for combat.
Yes.
In fact, I'd say a lot of the techniques that we see here have some degree of multi-purpose.
Now, obviously, it's going to depend on how you flavor it, what you're going to be able to personally use it for. Mm-hmm. but I do really like this. It helps clear out a lot of bloat in the book.
Yeah, and you know how I've ranted about spell bloat.
Yeah.
Here, there's only I'd say there's only about 30 or so pages worth of techniques, which that may seem like a lot, and it certainly is, but that's 30 pages out of a book that's nearly 400 pages. So it's low on the pages of spells ratio.
Yeah.
And I think you know exactly which one is the much bigger offender when it comes to pages of the book versus pages of spells.
Indeed.
But after that, we have conflict statistics. The following are character stats that are used when the GM uses the conflict rules. See the Tide and Morale Extended Conflict Resolution, which we will get to in a while. Some of these start with a base value dependent on the character's total potential level, and others have a static base for all characters. These stats can be increased by taking certain techniques. See the list of techniques in the previous section. Focus Refresh. During a conflict, characters spend focus points to take actions such as attacking and defending, moving around the battlefield, or using techniques. The Focus Refresh stat determines how many focus points each character gains at the start of a new round of conflict. See the Focus Points Acting During Conflicts chapter. Focus Refresh is based on a character's total potential level. All characters have a base Focus Refresh of 1, plus an additional 1 for every full 40 potential. Because characters usually begin a new campaign with 100 potential, they usually start with a Focus Refresh of 3, and will increase to 4 as soon as they receive an additional 20 potential for a total of 120 throughout the campaign. Focus Refresh can be increased by some abilities such as the Diligent Focus technique.
So I'm going to briefly interrupt you. We only had listed to go up to Katas. Techniques and professions were supposed to be for next week.
Whoops.
To be fair, I think techniques, that was fine to wrap into the others because of how short that was. As soon as we got through techniques, it just crossed my mind. I was like, wait a minlet.
Yeah, we'll keep going, and we'll cut off just before signature attacks.
Yeah.
But after that is morale threshold. The character's morale threshold value determines how much they can take before being forced out of combat. This not only measures a character's physical health, but also their mental focus and inner strength to endure hardships. As a group of characters takes actions that shift the tide of battle, they can inflict morale damage on the opposing side. When the morale damage accumulated by the player's side reaches a character's morale threshold, that character is close to their limits. They no longer regain focus points, the resource used to take actions in battle. Once the morale damage exceeds a character's threshold, they must leave the battle and can take no further actions unless they are able to rally. The morale threshold starting value states, all player characters start a morale threshold with a morale threshold value of 3. This can be increased by taking certain abilities such as Unyielding. NPCs will have a morale threshold determined by the type and importance of that character. For example, minions may have a threshold of 1, with the primary villain of an entire story may have a value of 5. And then we have Rally value. If a character is forced out of battle, they may still return if the situation that caused them to leave changes. Every PC has a rally value. If the player's side can inflict as much morale damage to the enemy as that value, the character can return to the conflict. For more details, see rally later on. NPCs may or may not have a rally value. Most minions and those unimportant to the plot are considered to be permanently removed from battle when their morale threshold is exceeded. PCs begin with a rally value of 4. This can be improved by the rebound. I think they forgot to add technique to that. Note that because rally value is a number that must be reached before a character can return, a lower rally value is better. The lower the value, the sooner the character returns. Bonuses to rally value will be a negative value, such as rally value -1. So, I'd say that's actually an easy way to get... It seems from this that because of how low morale thresholds is, it's easy for somebody to get out of the fight, but that gives just as much incentive for the people surviving it to get more aggressive to get their allies back in it. It certainly is a better way of getting people in and out of the fight, to show that if your morale threshold is hit, that doesn't mean you're out of the encounter entirely. Because we've seen that kind of thing where somebody's out of hit points and then they're in their dying setup, and worst case scenario, they're only taken out of the game for several rounds. Or best case scenario, they're only taken out for several rounds. Worst case scenario, they're taken out completely, and now that player has nothing to do. Whereas here, it's a case of I'm back.
The record, I'm fine with both of these ways. This does seem like a pretty interesting system.
Yeah, it's not an issue. It's not an issue of better or worse. It's an issue of one way being treated as the way you're supposed to do things. You know, that design by gospel I keep talking about. But then we have key limit. Key is a special kind of resource that players use to activate certain abilities and make others more powerful. Key itself is unlimited. A player can spend as much as they want. However, the strain of using too much key can take a toll on the body, mind, and spirit. Every character has a key limit that represents how much key they can use before suffering penalties. A character's key limit is based on their total potential level, similar to a focus refresh. For every 25 points of total potential level, a character's key limit increases by 2. For example, a character with 100 total potential would have a key limit of 8, and a character with 130 total potential level would have a key limit of 10. And then lastly is armor. Characters have a rating for armor in each domain of damage. This begins at 0 in all 3 and is increased with the armor technique. I think what I like about the conflict statistics here is that it doesn't matter what you're spending potential on, those are getting increased. It's not a situation where there are certain attributes and skills that directly influence those. At least when it comes to this angle, so that somebody who is spending more of their potential on non-combat stuff isn't going to be as much of a glass cannon as they could be. They're still going to be a bit of a glass cannon, but not as much.
Yeah. Like, overall, too, just very simple math. It's very easy to follow. Which I always appreciate.
Yeah. But so far, I think we have a very good foundation when it comes to character creation. What do you think?
Yeah. Like, I'm not going to say I'm, like, really excited about anything we've read, but it's all been good. It's all been well organized and easy to follow. I have a good idea for what kind of game we're in for, even though we're only into the second chapter of this book. Mm-hmm. It's a really good start.
Pretty much. So, and I'm gonna have to adjust the way I had written out the schedule now because of my bottomless stupidity. on that, but I think this
It's
is a
alright,
case
neither
of,
one of us caught it.
I think this is a case of a good problem to have.
Yeah.
So
Just kind of rolled right on by.
all that it means is just the list gets pushed a bit further upwards.
Yeah. Depending on how long the professions section is, because we were originally going to cover that along with techniques, it might just be able to get rolled into signature attacks. I don't think that was that long of a section either.
Not really.
We'll figure out. We'll figure out how we're going to handle that in a bit off stream. I don't know if anyone wants to sit up here and listen to us discuss the technical aspect of when we cover what.
Yeah, pretty much. And when it comes to professions, is only a couple pages. I'd say for that one it's going to be 60-40 between signature attacks and professions.
Yeah.
But all that it means is just a few things are getting moved around. But it shouldn't be too much of an issue. So we will see you next. We will see you again shortly when we handle the second half of character creation, as mentioned. Character creation was always going to be split into two parts. This just rejiggers that. So we'll see how things turn out. And of course, tomorrow I will be returning to Gubat Bunwa with Xanatrix, and we will see how things shake out there, because that obviously has been a lot of fun, and this looks to be very promising. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.